Right off the bat, I want to make it clear that I am not a shill or an apologist for China or Russia. What I would be, in its most raw and civilian form, is a fighter of media bias. For those unaware, I am a Filipino living in Japan for the past 16 years, and I was not originally interested in politics. During my childhood in the 80s and 90s, I grew up exposed to American pop culture. Part of that exposure was to be indifferent towards the Russians and the Chinese due to the massive influence of Western media and Hollywood movies. It is at this point that America, to me then, was the ultimate badass defenders of freedom and democracy, which I feel a lot of people back then would also agree with. Hollywood's reach to the far ends of the globe is truly quite astounding, and probably the most effective capitalist move any country can ever achieve. Fast forward to 2020, the year the COVID pandemic has disrupted the world, and not soon after, news broke out in 2022 on Russia's invasion over Ukraine. It was this time that I started noticing all kinds of different and misaligned information and narrative in the world news, especially touching on US-Russian topics. Everything seemed one-sided. Instead of taking in what the media was shoving down everyone's throats, I started digging deep. So allow me to summarize these findings. First, I notably discovered that the crisis in Ukraine escalated drastically in 2014 when the CIA and the British MI6 staged a regime change through a massive and violent revolution that overthrew a pro-Russian president named Yanukovych, and they replaced him with Western ones like Poroshenko and Zelensky. This caused a war with the separatists in Donbass for 8 years that claimed roughly 14,000 lives prior to Russia's special military operation in 2022. So no, the war in Ukraine did not start in February this year as we have been told to believe, and that's why the world is where it is today. Together with this information, I learned about the unnecessary expansion of NATO after the Cold War in 1991 and how they have been deliberately poking the bear or provoking Russia, especially by using Ukraine as a military bulwark by means of training and arming the Ukrainians after the Maidan Revolution in 2014. From that, I finally learned the truth about the US atrocities through the so-called interventions in Iraq, Libya, and several parts of the Middle East, which killed millions, leaving those countries in shambles and in chaos under false claims and in the name of the West version of democracy. I remembered how the Americans also took hold of the Philippines before and after World War II. They committed all sorts of human rights violations, manipulated our government, took advantage of our natural resources, and practically brainwashed the population into believing that they are our saviors despite the bad things they did. And since I live in Japan, I also learned that after World War II, Japan has been under American control. To this day, Japan holds the biggest U.S. military presence in the world, with roughly 56,000 American troops and 124 active military bases scattered throughout the country, especially in Okinawa, hence the constant local protests on U.S. personnel for abusing the locals. Unbeknownst to most people, the U.S. has appointed a Japanese imperial war criminal, Kishi Nobusuke, who was Shinzo Abe's grandfather, to be the prime minister after the war. Nobusuke co-founded a pro-American political party called the Liberal Democratic Party, or LDP, which has been in constant power for decades. Prior to Abe's assassination, he and his group have been whitewashing Japan's dark past, like using comfort women, the Nanjing Massacre, Unit 731, and others by revising history. Shinzo Abe was also trying to revive Japan as an imperialist and fascist state under U.S. control. Regardless of this, I do not condone his death. But I do not also blame the Chinese and those people who hated him for the reasons I've just mentioned. And now, because of the tension between China and Taiwan, the US again is poking its nose where it doesn't belong and provoking another proxy war, this time with China. And for your information, regardless of what others say, the fact is Taiwan is still and has always been officially part of China. Under the UN Treaty, America co-signed the One China policy in 1972, stating that the United States acknowledges that all Chinese on either side of the Taiwan Strait maintain there is but one China, and that Taiwan is part of China, and the US does not challenge that position. However, the US never kept its word by creating all sorts of trouble like the Nancy Pelosi visit to Taiwan and other things they can think of. And with the vast US military presence in Japan, and with the possibility of China making a move in retaliation, that's another Ukraine waiting to happen. With Taiwan in the center, using Japan as a defense, and possibly involving the rest of the Southeast Asian countries in a bloody conflict, while America makes tons of profit through selling weapons and taking over the shipping trade in the Pacific. What is the motive behind all this? It's all about economic hegemony. The US will not hesitate to maintain its economic power and eliminate competition by any means necessary, either by regime change, proxy wars, economic destabilizations, etc. With all this evidence, the US doesn't seem to believe in a multipolar world where it shares power and resources with others, unless they are under its umbrella or have the same exact principles.
Oh, hell no!
As a side note, the US should at least channel some of that military budget, currently at $801 billion, into its public health care, because the US government does not provide health benefits to citizens or visitors.
Help me! Help me!
Or even better, their student loan debt, currently at $1.6 trillion as of June 2022. I am not a journalist nor a geopolitical expert. What I do have is intolerance for media bias and manipulation. What I aim for is to provide everyone access and view of the bigger picture with my own personal time and resources. I am not benefiting from all of this. In fact, I have put myself in a lot of dangers and risks because those who speak about the truth or against the usual narrative of the mainstream media and the government will either be censored, deplatformed, demonetized, canceled, or worse. Anything just to shut you up. And this is democracy? I simply present all angles on the usual narrative by the biased media so people can make informed decisions. People deserve to know what's truly happening around them. Every citizen has the right to think about what's good for his country, for his community, and for himself in that order. However, it is human nature to be selfish, to look out for what's best for oneself first. Everyone is not always capable of thinking logically, may it be due to bad experiences, financial issues, or personal problems. Humans are innately emotional beings. We become highly emotional very easily, which lead to ill-informed opinions and decisions. People haven't got a clue how easy their lives are until something bad happens to them. So, in everything that you do, read or say, think twice, take a step back, and form your own opinions on your own terms. Take back your will and power for critical thinking.
Так дать пацанам посчитать потери, суммы нули погибать на сцене.